This is Pop Psychology Live. The YouTube is up, by the way, and it is official. It is youtube.com/Pop Psychology Live.
Nice.
We have at least a couple of hundred subscribers now, and so it's now officially the Pop Psychology Live after the youtube.com.
And you have to spell that correctly.
Yes. Yes. This time, the woman in Afghanistan does not know what psychology is.
Starts with a P, everybody. Just to get you started.
Say. So it's Pop Psychology Live, brought to you by PhoenixTrainingGroup.com, workplace violence prevention program for healthcare, behavioral health, social services, schools, and other industries that encounter cranky humans. So, and that's a lot these days. So my name is Doc Elliot. I've served as a crisis negotiator for 40 years, worked within the behavioral health and forensic psychology field for just as long. And this is my partner, Scott Galbraith, who will tell you a little bit about himself.
I just hang out with a lot of strange people.
Yes. That makes you qualified completely. Yes. Yeah. I've known Scott since, mid-'80s? Mid-'80s, right?
Yes.
Yeah, mid-'80s. We've worked together within behavioral health in some of those years. So do you know what pop psychology really is? I mean, have you seen the definitions for pop psychology?
Oh, no. Are we supposed to know that?
Well, we're learning it as we go.
I didn't know there was going to be a test.
Yes, there's a test. So there are a few definitions that are known for popular psychology.
Mm-hmm.
One is term in replacement of pop psychology is psychobabble. I love that. That's
what it's most closely equated with.
It is, with especially our show. You'll hear the worst psychological advice and viewpoints you'll ever hear. So don't watch or listen to us. And if you're needing some quality viewpoints, please turn this off. And please, if you're experiencing a mental health emergency, please turn this off immediately and seek the appropriate care, or dial 911.
Well said.
Yes. Yes. So pop psychology, there are a couple of definitions. One, a noun, psychological or pseudo-psychological counseling, interpretations, concept, terminology, etc., often simplistic or superficial, popularized by certain personalities, magazine articles, television shows, advice columns, or the like. We're the like.
We are the like.
Or the like. That influence the general public.
Yes. We will rub your brain.
Yes, I think that's a really good description of what this is going to be all about. Then there's the kinder, gentler definition, which is theories and advice about people's behavior that are easily understood and intended to help people improve their lives. That's such a nice, touchy-feely description, but
you will be disappointed.
Yeah. Yes, it's not going to work. That won't work. Yeah. So we're just going to rub your brain and get away with
it. But you've given consent.
Yes,
so,
the fact that you are listening and watching is giving consent. So it's your fault.
We cannot have any liability for anything.
None, absolutely, because we've told you, we warned you, leave the room now, go away, do not watch or listen to this at all.
If you have
this is the worst advice ever.
If you have a shred of human decency, walk away. Just walk away.
Please. And if you don't have any decency, then seek medical or behavioral health attention.
But meanwhile, we'll stay with you till they get there.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's the waiting room from hell. It's like the waiting room in Beetlejuice.
And you have the long number.
Right? Yeah. Don't trade with the headhunter.
No, no, just accept your lot.
Yes.
It's
And this
really
is
it.
it. We're the lot. Sorry.
If you found your way here, our condolences,
Mm,
but we're glad you're here.
sorry. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
we are. We are very glad you're here. We'll take anything that we get. So,
Oh, look, one subscriber.
yay!
Sweet.
Woohoo.
Oh,
Oh,
wait, that was
no,
me.
they left. They
That
left.
was me.
They left.
I realized what I'd gotten into when I
You're right.
unsubscribed.
Yeah, Scott actually hasn't subscribed yet.
I just can't take it.
He keeps subscribing and unsubscribing just as a rule.
I'm conflicted.
He has, yeah,
wanna
he hasn't
subscribe.
committed. He
I
hasn't
wanna
committed
support.
fully yet.
I want to support us. I just, I don't
But
know if I
he's,
should. I don't know if it's a good idea.
yeah, he's scared.
I mean, what would
But you
people
should
say?
be. Anyone watching this should be. Mm.
Oh, well, welcome
So
everyone.
I had a question for you. We've talked about this before, that the psychology behind the Karens and the Karenology right now. Um, and I wasn't aware until just recently that there are more different versions of Karens that have been associated over the years, even back in the early 1800s. And so there's always been a Karen or something like it. There were just different names for them. And so there were names such as Permit Patty. Have you heard that one?
No.
So besides, the Karens of today. Do you know when the Karens came in, by the way? Where the Karen, what year around?
Um,
What would you guess?
I'm guessing in the Middle Ages.
The Karen?
Yes.
No, Karen is brand new. Karen came in around.
I was thinking they were called Margaret or Elizabeth.
No. But no, I mean like literally the Karen, not like the other names, but Karen.
Modern Karen.
Yes, it can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Contemporary Karen.
The term Karen came in around 2010.
Huh.
So 2010, that was around the first reference to a Karen in the actual Karen, Karen. Before that, in the 1990s, it was Becky. Don't be a Becky.
I heard about her butt, but that's another subject.
Yeah. We've all seen Becky's butt. So before that, then you get into Permit Patties, because they're always like wanting you to get a permit for something, right? So Permit Patty. There was even a Barbecue Becky, because there was some incident surrounding a barbecue place, and she said that they didn't have the right to do something, and so they call her Barbecue Becky. Then I love this one, Whitefish Karen. I love just the image of that alone just is great. And then there's Kroger Karen also, because one of the Karens went postal in a Kroger grocery store. And then
that'd be Midwest for
yes, absolutely. And then there was the Karen became such an influential pop psychology entity that in San Francisco, the city council there in San Francisco actually passed an initiative. It's the Karen Act. They did this, but it's spelled with a C. Caren, the Karen, right? Because they couldn't find anything to go with K. So, but the Karen Act it stands for Caution Against Racially Exploitive Non-Emergency Act. It's the Caution Against Racially Exploitive Non-Emergency Act. And that
So,
basically, it's a law now in San Francisco. If you call 911 over something that's racial and not a true emergency, then you can now get cited or prosecuted for.
so, okay, so it's been defined as racially motivated
Correct.
since way
Since the
back.
Civil War, since before the Civil War, actually,
Okay.
in as far back as 1815 through 1860 something, around 1860, it was called the Karens of the day were called Miss Anns.
Well, I don't like it.
I don't either. Just like pop psychology. Pop psychology. I don't know what it is, but I don't like it. As said by Dr. Phil.
Did you see the recently? Was it Morgan Freeman?
Yeah.
Uh, he had an interesting take. He said, you know how we can end racism is I'll stop calling you white and you stop calling me black.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just be people instead. And because I'm not a fan of racism, I'm not a fan of saying that skin defines you.
No.
And that there should be presupposed characteristics or conditions that you bring with you
No,
simply by
there
a
just
pigment.
are none.
And so I fully agree with that. And I think the more awareness that there is, right now we're not seeing that. What we're seeing
No.
is just an intensification of division.
Of the division.
So
Correct. Right. The
we're just
division
focusing on that you're this or you're that,
Right.
and then this. If you're this, then this has to happen, and if
Right.
you're that, this has, instead of just knocking it off.
And this is a new concept to me, really, because ever since I was little and grew up, I grew up in the Midwest, and we grew up on the north side of town, which the really nice side of town was the south side of town, and in Springfield, Missouri. And so I grew up on the north side, and there were a lot more um, uh, blacks on the north side. And so that's just what I grew up with. And so I just grew up with tons of black friends. And we went to barbecues, the neighbors, and they were black. And my parents had lots of black friends and Asian friends.
That was the difference, is they weren't black.
Right. There was no division at that time. It was
Right.
just friends. Nobody had a color. It was just Daryl or Jake or this guy or our friends down our neighbors, right? There was no mention in my family. There was no mention of what color somebody was or what race they were. I never even knew that. It was just the friends or the neighbors or the Johnsons or whatever, right? And so that's I grew up with absolutely no division whatsoever in my personal life, in my family. Now in Missouri, yeah, there are racial divisions in Missouri. I just grew up not having one. And so that when Morgan Freeman said that same thing of okay, there is no black or white. Just stop calling me black. I'm not going to call you white. It's not even a thing. Then that's like, yes, I mean, that's how I grew up. Why don't people do that? Why don't we just integrate as a human, as a person? We're all exactly the same inside. And I just never understood that. That's something that just always was perplexing to me growing up. Later on, when I got out and saw that other people had divisions, and I go, what is that about? Why is that a thing? And so I was kind of a late bloomer in terms of understanding there was actually a division, because I grew up with no divisions whatsoever.
And I think that that's what it is it is learned, it's taught.
Mm-hmm.
And right now it's enforced.
Oh.
It's
gone
spread,
backwards.
it's pushed on people.
Right.
It is designated as this is how it is. And it's ridiculous. You know, I turn away when I see any of the headlines that are
Yep.
like that now. I
Yep.
don't care about it because it's not, I don't live that way.
Right.
I'm not
No.
that.
I don't even want to absorb that.
I don't want to, I don't want to have that inflicted on me as saying like, look at what you are.
Yeah.
I'm not. That's not who I am.
I'm just a guy, you know, just getting along with other people and showing empathy and helping people and doing things for people and existing in my family and we have lots of friends, and it's like we have friends. We don't have Black friends. We don't have Asian friends. We don't have Indian friends. We do, but I don't even look at them like that. They're just our friends. I know, I get it, because it's like after a while, it's like I don't want to even contribute to that. And the more we talk about it, it's like the more I feel there's a division. It's like, no, but to me, it's like talking like Morgan Freeman. Okay, I'm just gonna say it, and I'm gonna say it once, and if you hear it, fine, great. But this is how I look at it. There you go.
Yeah, take it or leave it.
Yeah, take it or leave it. Enough said. To me, it's like enough said.
And then if there are some proactive measures that could be done, one that immediately comes to mind is every single job application ever says, are you white? Are you Black? Are you? And I heard this great comedian who had a good take on it. He was like, they want us to believe that we're white or Black. And he's like, he said, I'm not Black. And he's like, so I went down to the paint store and I went through their color charts to figure out what I was. He said, I'm actually, and I can't remember what it was, but it was like, I'm actually like midnight caramel. He's like, and you're more like peach sorbet. And he's like, so don't let them tell you that you're white or you're Black and cause that division. There's a whole lot of colors out there.
I love that. That's great. See, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
God, it's like just humans have become so regulated in everything. It's just taken so much fun out of things. My kids, they're always saying, there's so much more fun when you were a kid. You tell me these stories of what you did and what you could do and all these things. It's like, we can't do any of that stuff now. Humans have just regulated everything down to the psychology of what we can and can't do all the time. I feel bad for them. I really do feel bad. I go, all the things that we did that we got away with, that we would have been called the SWAT team on here now, things like that.
Well, I attribute it in part to the misunderstanding on government's part on what they're supposed to do.
Or if they have any business doing it in the first place.
When you think, the name government, right? So they have to govern. That's what a government does, right? It's right in the job description. You govern. But what's weird is, so take our young country. What are we? 250 years old? 200? We're not that old. And but
we're just a youngster in the
we
world.
are. But from the first Congress to now, every session is about making laws.
Right.
Although I think they've made great progress in these last 4 years in that they've done absolutely nothing for 4 years. They've done nothing of any consequence or value. They're worthless.
Which is sometimes,
and that might be the best possible outcome.
Right.
Is that they don't get any legislation passed. But you figure
there's an upside to that.
Cumulative effect of putting in hundreds of lawyers together to make laws. So you're making laws, and you're doing that all day, every day, year after year after year. You can't help but have a big fat book of laws.
Yeah.
Right.
And
they
the
don't
laws
repeal the
never
old
go
ones.
away. It's like they've still got laws that are 250 years old that don't apply to humans at all anymore, but they're still in the books.
Do you know you can't hunt mice in Cleveland?
No.
So for all those wannabe mice hunters, sorry, you're going to have to relocate. If you spit on the sidewalk or cuss in front of a woman, it's a crime.
Yeah, it's on the books. I know.
Yes. So, I mean, there's instances where we may have a process in place to at least review every once in a while and say, hey, do we still need this?
Yeah, right. I really think that they should have sessions on delawing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what are the laws we can get rid of because that doesn't fit with humans at all anymore?
Is it still required to wear a petticoat in church? Right. We got to do that.
But the trouble is, you're going to have some people in this government that will say, I don't know. Maybe.
Well, it would be if Trump wants a petticoat or doesn't want a petticoat, then yeah, we're going to have petticoats.
Oh God. Yeah, I just feel bad for my kids. They're so frustrated. That's why they love going back to Missouri, where you can still do stuff and
heck, we all did
have fun. And oh my God,
we all loved meeting you in Missouri.
Yeah, because we do.
We got to hang out with your dad and just enjoy life.
Yeah, I mean, the things that I did and got away with in Missouri, you would be locked up and called the SWAT team on every single time of what I did back then.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how I got. Well, I know how I got away with it. No, I was about to say, I don't know how I got away. Well, I know how I got away with it because my dad was the captain of the sheriff's department.
That probably helped. Not everybody had that.
And that's why I didn't have a name for years. I was just Jack's boy. I'd be flying down the road at literally, and I'm not exaggerating, 130 miles an hour because the Mustang, one of the Mustangs I had was that 428 Cobra Jet Shelby Mustang, and it was 180 mile an hour Mustang, and I so it was no problem for me to fly down a road at 130, 140, no problem. And I'd fly past it like over 100 miles an hour, and the cops would start to like, oh my God, they're like, oh, we're gonna throw this one in jail, we're gonna tase him to death, and whatever they were gonna do to me. And then they'd see the license plate, and they go, yeah, let him go. It's just Jack's boy.
Jack's boy.
Or I would get stopped, and they'd run my license, and they'd see my driver's license. They go, are you Jack Elliott's boy? Yes, sir, I am. Oh, okay. Does he know you're out doing this stuff? Not until you're going to tell him, but I'm sure you will. You're dang right I'm going to tell him. Get out of here. Yeah. So I didn't have a name for a long time.
So that kind of reminded me of something I was thinking about the other day when you mentioned that, and why it got triggered in my mind was the association with the cops pulling you over. But I've always known
that was a daily occurrence.
and with your dad as the sheriff, you've always had a close association with law enforcement and such.
Yeah, but, all my whole family is all law enforcement.
But one thing I didn't know about, and I wanted to ask you about, was how did you ever get involved with hostage negotiation? How did that happen? You mentioned that the other day that that was part of what you do with Phoenix Training Group, and but I never heard how you actually got started with that.
Wow. Well, okay. Let me answer that with a question first. Do you remember what you were doing when you were turning 18? Do you remember?
Yeah, but I can't tell you.
So what was happening in your life, you know, at 18, you know, just anything that you can disclose.
Well, there are all kinds of things.
Yeah.
That was a busy year. There was a lot going on, both here and in California.
Yeah.
That was the year where I moved from here back to California. So,
Okay.
but a lot happened. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyhow.
Yeah. So when I was turning 18, and I had been working in a psych hospital since I was 17, and there was a friend of the family that was a social worker, and she just identified in me and I don't know why, that I would be good working in a psych hospital. It was probably some way to get me in a psych hospital. I don't know, but maybe I would never be able to leave. But she identified something in me that she says, I think that you would be really good working with individuals that have mental illness, and I think you have a compassion and you have an empathy and an understanding that I think you would be really good at that. Have you thought about doing that? And I go, yeah, I actually was. That was going to be my major going into college, and I was just starting to go into college as well at the university in Missouri, and so it was going to be all psych related. And she says, "Well, I have there's a place that I work with, and there's actually 2 psych facilities here in the town that I grew up in Missouri. One was just a private hospital, and one was a federal institution, and they were both psych. So she set up an interview, and they hired me, and I started working in a psych hospital when I was 17. I was still in high school when I was working in psych. So I would come to the lunchroom every day and tell psych stories to all the other kids, you know, without saying names or anything like that. It was all, you know, anonymous, because
We didn't have HIPAA back
you know,
then.
yeah, because you sign waivers and all sorts of things that you will never ever disclose anybody's name that's in a psych hospital. So everything was, you know, it was John Doe and Jane Doe and things like this. And so I would tell stories, but nobody would ever figure out, you know, who those people were. So I was working in the psych hospital, and I loved it. And once I got in, I absolutely just adored it. I loved working with psych, and I especially adolescents and kids, and but I just had a good handle on working in psych. So that was going along, and I worked at the private hospital, and then I would do some time over at the federal facility. Now, the federal facility is just like I mentioned, it's a federal medical center facility for mental illness and physical illnesses if you are a high level criminal. So these are the serial killers. So the serial killers and the people like John Gotti, the mob boss, I can talk about him because he's dead now. He was at the Federal Medical Center. And the Birdman of Alcatraz was there. And lots of notable individuals were at that place, right? So we're talking the worst of the worst. The highest level psych in the country there's like 3 of them, and one is in Missouri. So I was doing time kind of back and forth, and I decided I loved psych, and I just had a good handle on how to talk with people and how to de-escalate people, and if somebody's having a psychotic break, I could talk them down and I could refocus them, and so it was just something I became kind of good at kind of quickly. So that being said, my whole family's been in law enforcement. My dad was the captain of the sheriff's department. My so-called uncle, he was always just Uncle Mickey to us. I didn't find out he wasn't actually a blood uncle until I was probably like 13 or so, but he was just always, the sheriff was just Uncle Mickey. And my mom had been commissioned at one point. My sister had been commissioned at one point to transfer prisoners and things. My grandfathers on both sides. One was chief of police, the other was Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And then on back, the lineage just went back and back and back. Dad's friends that we would hang around with were deputies, police, FBI agents, ATF. I remember going when I was a teenager, going on an ATF raid in the sticks, looking for stills, alcohol stills, with the ATF agent. Fun things to do when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Go on the ATF raids. Woo! So that was just kind of like, yeah, right. It was just kind of like you were saturated in that law enforcement world. So by attrition, it was almost, my dad never expected me to go into law enforcement. He never pressured me. He never said, you need to do this. When are you going to do this? Never really mentioned it. He was going to let me decide if I ever wanted to do stuff like that. Right. So around the time, now 18, in Missouri, you could be commissioned in a limited capacity as a sheriff's deputy at 18. In most other states, you had to be 21, but in Missouri, it was if you were commissioned for a certain skill that you had, you could be commissioned. I just turned 18, and there was on the east side of town in Missouri, in Springfield, that I grew up in. There was a young fellow that had barricaded himself in a house, and he was probably really drunk. He was probably on drugs, and he may have had some mental illness as well. And he barricaded himself in a house, and he had lots of guns, because everybody has lots of guns in Missouri. And so he started shooting up the house, inside the house. Now, his grandmother was in the house at the time, and so she just happened to be the collateral damage, and he had shot her. We never really found out if it was on purpose or by accident, but she got shot. She actually crawled out a window to get out of the house. Poor grandma. And
that's no way to treat your grandma.
No, it's not a good thing to treat your Grammy like that. And so she crawled out of the house, and that's who went and called the police, was grandma. But then he was so delusional on whatever drugs he was on, he shot all of the animals in the house. Now, in terms of law enforcement, if you shoot somebody in the house, you shoot grandma, there may be a reason why you shot grandma, right? Grandma might be part of that reason. So there's kind of a give and take and an understanding about that. It's not a good thing to do to shoot grandma, but there may be a reason why. Grandma may be a part of that equation.
It merits looking deeper into what happened.
Right. Yeah, just a deep dive psychologically on this.
Why'd you shoot grandma?
Yeah, right. there might be a good reason, because grandma did this and this and this. Oh, well, that's not okay. But it's not okay to shoot her, but that's, there's part of the equation. So anyway, but if you shoot animals, then that raises the threat level. And all in law enforcement, they know this, children, animals. If you're willing to shoot innocent entities, then that raises the threat level, because you're capable of anything.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. Where grandma may be a part of that equation. Not that it's okay, but no. there may be some extended reason.
She burned my grits.
That's right. So don't do that. And so So that started the process. The county law enforcement, the sheriff's deputies came, and so they were kind of figuring out what to do. And now the threat level's higher because he had shot the animals in the house, right? So there's a process where in if you have somebody who's done something like that, you usually send in, because he's by himself, there's nobody else in the house, so that gives the authority for law enforcement agencies to enter the establishment and try to neutralize that threat. And so if you can talk that person down, that's the first ultimate goal, to do that. But if you can't, then you're not going to mess around. You will eliminate that threat.
Have fun storming the castle.
Right. So this is where in big cities they call the SWAT team and things like that. Well, Missouri is a small town. They didn't have a SWAT team. They barely had a tactical unit. They just had deputies, right, and the sheriff and the deputies. And so the decision to go in is based on a couple of things. And this is what I didn't know. And so at this point, the sheriff, Uncle Mickey, was on site, and he didn't really know what to do with this guy. And he knew that he had some psych issues. So he knew that I was working in a psych hospital, and I dealt with these type of individuals, and that I was going into psych in college as well. And so he didn't know what to do. He calls up my dad, who was captain of the sheriff's department, and he calls up my dad and says, now your son, he knows all that psych stuff, right? And my dad said, yes, he works in that field, right? So he goes, well, do you think he might be able to do something with this guy and talk him down? And my dad says, I don't know. Do you want me to call him and ask him? And Sheriff Megan says, yeah. Could you? I just want to see what his take on this is. And so my dad called me. He asked me, there's a kind of a crisis negotiation thing here in town. Uncle Mickey was asking if you wanted to be involved in some way. And I didn't even let him finish. I go, hell yeah. So I was stupid. I was 18, just turned 18. And so I ran down there real fast. And so I since there were no other people in the house, I asked Uncle Mickey, I said, well, why don't you just go in? Because you got enough firepower here, you can go in. And he goes, well, we could. And in most cases, in a bigger city, that's exactly what would happen. But in a small town, it's a little bit different, because if I go in there, or my deputies go in there, and that old boy points a rifle, because he had a 30-30. He was shooting 30-30 rounds out the windows, right? It wasn't a pea shooter 22. It was a deer hunting rifle. And he goes, if he raises a gun to my deputies, they are not going to mess around, and they're going to take him out before he gets one shot, right? Now, in terms of criminals, that's just the way it goes. But in a small town like this, if we go in and do that, my deputies go in, and he raises a rifle, and we have to shoot that man, which we don't want to do. That man might be a boy. That boy might be one of my best friend's son. He might be the son of somebody that I know, a family member. Hell, it might even be my own son in there, for all I know. I don't know. And so these are the things we have to look at when we go in a small town, because I don't want to be responsible for going in and then that guy raises a rifle and we shoot somebody, and then I find out later, oh, that's my buddy's son that we just shot. And not that I want to shoot anybody, we don't, we don't, that's always a regret, and we have to deal with that. But I don't want to be responsible for that. So that's always what we have to consider. And so even if it wouldn't be one of my family or anybody else's family, that's what I consider when I go in each time, is that's going to be somebody's son. That's going to be somebody's daughter. That's going to be somebody's uncle or mother or father. And so those are the things I think about when I go in places. I don't want to shoot anybody, but I definitely don't want to shoot somebody that I know, or a son of somebody I know. So these are the things we have to think about. And so it's just like there was a light bulb that went off, because up until that time, you watch things on TV and you think, oh, criminals and people, they try to shoot law enforcement and they shoot back, and you go, well, I'm glad they didn't shoot the deputies, and you know, you shouldn't do that, you know. But that
bad guys got taken out.
Right, and that, to me, that sent a light bulb off in my head, and I got something that I hadn't understood before. I go, that makes just so much sense, that you don't want to shoot anybody for that matter, but there's so many ramifications that if you do, and then it's somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's mom and dad, and so it just puts a whole layer of empathy that I could understand, but I didn't have the experience to understand until that day. And Sheriff Mickey was really, he was a brilliant man. Now, Sheriff Mickey Owens, by the way, he was not just a sheriff. Sheriff Mickey was Mickey Owens. Now, Mickey Owens was a famous Major League Baseball player.
No kidding.
Yeah, well, he played in the 30s. Mickey played for the St. Louis Cardinals and the Brooklyn Dodgers. In the 40s, he played for the Boston Red Sox and the Chicago Cubs. And he had his own bubblegum cards and everything. He was a major league player in baseball life. So he's a very famous baseball player. And then he retired in Springfield, and then ran for sheriff, and he won, and he was a sheriff, from about 1964 all the way up to about 1981, and that was Sheriff Mickey Owens. So he was a really smart man, and he considered so many things, and that was a time like in the 50s and 60s and 70s where in a small town it was like Andy Griffith.
That's what I was thinking about. You're just a little bit bigger than me, Larry.
Right. It was really like that. It seemed like that. It had that same nuance as like Andy Griffith, and he always had a sidearm, but sometimes he would go into a situation without a gun, and he would just talk to people and talk them down without having to draw a weapon at all. And so Mickey was Uncle Mickey was really a great guy. And so the fact that he came up with that to tell me made perfect sense to me. And it brought on a layer of empathy that I just didn't have the experience for. But I understood it instantly like that. And I got it. And so he says, so do you think you can do anything with this guy? Do you maybe talk him down or something? Because, you know, you deal with that kind of stuff. You talk people down all the time, and in the psych hospitals. And I said, I can give it a shot. And so he's, well, I can't let you in as a civilian. So we'd have to deputize you. And he goes, you're 18. You know, I go, yeah. He goes, all right, we can deputize you. And so he had me raise my right hand, and he goes, all right, so you, John Elliott, swear to uphold the constitutional laws of the county of Greene County, Missouri. So help you God. And I went, yes, sir. And he goes, okay, you're a deputy. All right, so he deputized me right there on the spot at the location of that incident right there. So that's when I became a deputy. I just right there. In fact, well, wait.
Oh.
I just happened to have, oh, look at this. Check this out. In my drawer, just happened to have my Greene County, Missouri badge right there. Here's,
Yes.
here's my Greene County badge I got back a long time ago,
Very nice.
back in the 70s. So, um, he goes, well, what's your plan? And I go, I don't know. I have to get close enough to him, and I don't want to use a bullhorn or anything. That just is annoying. And so there was a tree that was in the backyard, and he was shooting out the back of the house. And luckily, he was shooting out of the front of the house where the road was. He was shooting out of the back of the house, but they wanted to keep him out in the back of the house. So they had all the cars and everything back in the back of the house. So there was a tree that was maybe about, I'd say 30, 40 feet away from the back porch. And it was about, I'd say maybe about that wide. And so I snuck up behind that tree out of the line of sight of him, and I got to the tree. And that's when I started talking with him. And they told me his name, and so let's say it's Frank. It wasn't Frank, but let's say it was Frank. And I say, Frank, and he like, what's that? Who's there? And he was like just manic, right? And before I started to tell him my name, and that's when he started shooting the tree, right at that very moment, with a 30-30 rifle.
Yeah.
And bark was blowing off on this side, bark was blowing off on the back side, right? And I was just really glad that I was not wider than the tree.
Yeah.
And so I just stood just as straight as a rail behind that tree while Frank shot that tree for a very long time. And I talked and he would shoot. I would try to talk, he'd shoot. Bark's blowing off on both sides, right? And I just talked and listened and talked and listened. No matter what he did or said or yelled or shot, I just stood there and talked and listened and talked and listened. And I was just trying to say anything I could that could form some kind of bond that would allow him to trust me and what I was saying. And I just kept on talking, and he kept on shooting. And for
Why do you hate trees, Frank?
he hates that tree. It's like Steve Martin. He hates those trees. It's a good thing because it's not me. And so for 2.5 hours, he shot that tree while I talked and listened to that guy.
Wow.
And after a while, he just shot less, and there were 20-minute intervals after a while where he'd shoot, and he was probably coming down from some of the drugs and whatever delusions may have been subsiding, but he started actually listening and talking. We got a dialogue going, and so eventually he stopped shooting, and we just talked, and I would listen to him, and I could hear him crying. And then once you hear him crying, I knew I had him to some extent, and that empathy was going back and forth. You have to create. There's a step process. You have to create. You have to use active listening. That creates the rapport. The rapport creates empathy. And so that process was going on. And I hadn't really I knew that process fundamentally in behavioral health and psych, but I didn't know that at the time that was an actual step process in the negotiation process that we use today. So I finally got him to put down and throw out his guns, but he's got 20 more in there, so you don't trust. Oh, he's threw out the gun. Now we can just walk out there. You never do that, because in Missouri they've got 20 other guns in there.
Oh yeah.
And so we got him to come out. I got him to promise he wouldn't shoot anybody, and that nothing would happen to him. And he finally came out, and he walked out down the steps, and down on the ground, and I got him to lay down on the ground. And the deputies, they rushed up and put him in handcuffs, and it wasn't like on TV where they just like cart him away. It was, yeah. I sat with him while he was on the ground. I actually sat down on the ground on the grass with him, and I just kind of like put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, "It's going to be okay. We're going to work with you. We're going to help you. We're going to help you. We're going to take you a place that can help you. And don't worry, you'll get over this. You'll get past this, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel." And so I just kind of sat with him for a few minutes, and then we took him to, at that time, now you take somebody like that to a psych hospital after you've been medically cleared or something, make sure that there's nothing medical, but they just took you to jail back then. And then I facilitated a transfer from there later on to the psych unit. Anyway, so at the time when they did take him away, Uncle Mickey comes up, Sheriff Mickey Owens, and he comes up to me and he goes, "Son, that's the damnedest thing I ever seen." And he had, just like he had a sticker in his hand. It wasn't a badge or anything. It was just like an imaginary sticker or something he had in his hand. And he comes over and he just goes whap, and he hits me right on my shoulder. And he goes, "Son, you are our new negotiator." That is good. Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
That was your interview.
Yeah, that was my interview. That was my first interview. And from then on, I took the psych principles that I worked with and I developed, and there was some things that I developed as an algorithm that I developed that help psych staff determine if it was something they could actually de-escalate, or if it was something that they were going to have to take more measures on. And so I created this algorithm back then. And then I thought, well, that probably applies to negotiation. So I took that same algorithm and I remixed it and put it into law enforcement. And that's what became the standardization for this algorithm that I created called the BEN model. And so it allowed negotiators to understand about an individual without having to know that individual. And because years all the way back from years past and up and through the 80s and even into the early 90s, even on TV, you'd see somebody up on a ledge wanting to jump off, and you, but down on the ground, you have a lot of cops running around saying, "Go get this guy's mother. Go get his girlfriend. So we have some information on this guy," right? You always saw that in the movies years ago. Well, that frustrated me, because that means you were totally dependent on that guy for all of your intel, or somebody who knew them. And so you're going to get bad intel or no intel a lot of times. So I didn't want to be based on the negotiator being dependent on anybody. I wanted it to be something they knew already going into the situation.
What was the model? What did you call it?
The BEND model, BEND, right? And so it was. Here it is. This is an example of the BEND model right here. It's the behavioral evaluation and negotiation development model. And so that's what I developed right there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. And so here's the situational stairway model, which is the FBI model of negotiation right here, that we use. And this was a marriage of that right here, but still this model still needed information. And how do we get that information from that guy to the negotiator? And so I created the algorithm to understand that guy without having to know him, and where this was coming from or might be able to come from. So it understood, is this a communication issue, or is it a symptom of their illness issue? And so they were able to identify very quickly if this is something communication related or symptom of their illness related, that allowed the negotiator to say, I think this is a communication thing. This is something we can work with. Let's go this path. So let's go. Once you decide that, then this is the path we go. If it's a symptom of their illness, it doesn't mean that we can't negotiate them, but it's going to be a lot more difficult. And so we may have to go off in a different direction, but at least have the resources ready in case we have to go in that direction. So it became kind of an algorithm of, is this negotiable or non-negotiable, right? This is something we can work with easily and talk with. This is something we have to get reinforcements for. And so it catapulted it into that situational stairway model. And the situational stairway model is nothing more than the active listening. Active listening creates rapport. You can't have rapport without active listening. Once you establish the rapport, active listening creates empathy. If you can't have the empathy without the active listening, once you have the empathy, that creates the rapport. And nothing that of rapport is created without that active listening or empathy. And this is where the negotiation actually starts, is once you have established the rapport. The negotiation doesn't start in active listening and empathy. It starts once you have created the active listening and empathy that created that rapport. Once you create the rapport, then you have the ability to negotiate that individual or not, right? And then that creates the influencing of the direction, which then creates the behavior shift, and then it hopefully goes into a good direction. So that's kind of like the model I created back then, and then it became the standard in negotiation, and that's what I spent a lot of time doing, going around and training people with that model of that Bend model, so we could understand how to negotiate people better. So it was just kind of like a little plug-in to the existing model of negotiation, and it allowed just a little bit more information to be established. So it made it easier for the negotiator to negotiate without having to know a lot of information from the individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and increase the chances of a desirable outcome.
By far, right. Because otherwise, then he's like, why is he going off? I don't know. Why is he upset? I don't have a clue. Okay. Well, you're never going to be able to get a negotiation from that. So this cut through and went, oh, this is probably why he's upset. All right, well, we have a direction now. Once you have some information, then at least you have a direction, and then the ability to negotiate this to a great outcome goes up tenfold. That's how I got into negotiation. So and then I became the negotiator there, and had a good success rate, and then went on to develop that same model and then create a program that became the standardized program in psych of how to deal with assaultive, violent individuals, and how to negotiate them and how to de-escalate them. That became a de-escalation program called Management of Assaultive Behavior, which became the first standardized program in the country in hospitalization, medical hospitals, psych hospitals across the country.
Which I'm very familiar with.
Yes, because you took that class back in the 80s, I believe. Yeah. You came to a hospital, and it's how we became friends. You got employed by a hospital, and you took one of my classes back in the 80s, I think, mid 80s, I believe.
And I remember just being blown away because I was new to psych. I mean, I'd been around crazy people, my sister and all that, my whole life. Yeah. But
and you're allowed to say that because that was your sister.
Right.
We tend to try to be a lot more politically correct now, but since it's your sister, you can own that.
Yeah, but I mean, but actually working in a facility and being involved in that day by day, and then we had just a vast amount of training that we went through as counselors there, and I just remember the very first part of MAV and thinking, this is just different. This is, every type of school I had been to, this was not like that.
Mm-hmm.
This was different, and this was human to human. And I think that's the underlying foundation that you pegged early on when Uncle Mickey put it to you in that fashion of like, that's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's son.
Yeah. Right.
It's not just a criminal. It's not somebody shooting up the place. It's not violent. This is somebody's relative, somebody that was a little boy once, played with Tonkas or whatever,
Right.
and now doing this. And that humanity that was injected at that point into your understanding, and that obviously you carried across your entire career in life, every aspect of your life that I saw, it was infused with that humanity. And I remember telling people, when I would describe you, I would say that he was a person that that treated everybody with the respect they deserved. And that was your underlying foundation, was a recognition of an individual's humanity. So whether you're in a clinical atmosphere, whether you're in a heavily regulated industry, whether you're in a sterile environment, none of that supersedes the fact that you're dealing with a human being here and an entire life of stories and feelings and experiences and emotions and all of this in a package. That's what you're dealing with. And so when I saw that in MAB, it was pretty amazing to see that in what, previous to that, things that we knew about, that people knew about psych, was we saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, we saw things like that. And we're just like, wow, that's harsh. That is a cold environment.
And it is a cold environment. It still is a cold environment to some extent. And back then it was even worse. But you're right. I found that humanity, and that's actually one of the coping skills that I personally have when I'm dealing with an individual, whether they're mentally ill, whether they're aggressive, whether it's a hostage negotiation. I have this skill to see every single human being as a 5-year-old child. And so that's been one of my coping skills of how to put it in perspective. So they cease to become a criminal. They cease to become an angry man. And I see a 5-year-old throwing a tantrum. And they're instantly somebody that I can have empathy for. Because to me, there's no way I could get angry at a 5-year-old throwing a tantrum. It's cute, right? And so somebody that's maybe really assaultive, maybe really aggressive, even a criminal, and they're just going at it, and I can physically see them as, like, their face and bone structure, everything. I can physically see them as a 5-year-old child shaking their fists. And I look at it, and I try not to smile, because you can't smile when you're in a situation like that. Otherwise, they're going to say, "What are you smiling?" But,
like, don't point and laugh.
No, you cannot laugh. Right? But inside, I just go, "Oh, that's so cute. Oh, you're so adorable. Oh, nobody taught you any coping skills, did they? Let's work on that." Let me teach you some coping skills. Right? That's my little internal dialogue that I say inside, and then everything else is professional outside. But that's what I'm seeing and hearing and saying inside.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Right, and so that allows me to deal with them as a child, not treat them as a child, but deal with them as a child and what children need and what everyone needs. And everybody to me is just a big child. I can see anybody in traffic. I can see people upset. I can see celebrities. I can see presidents. And I see them all as children trying to act like they're grown up. And so it just puts it in perspective so much, and it allows me to not get upset at somebody or not get triggered by somebody who says, you know, like we're in a situation where somebody's, you know, they're pointing and they're going, "You're a butt face," and I go, and to me, it's just, oh, that's so cute. You're so adorable. You know, inside this, my little dialogue, you know, and that allows me not to get triggered. Oh, well, you're a butt face, you know, and that just doesn't happen because I just see them as a child, and I deal with them as a child, and meet their needs as a child. And that's pretty much what every human being needs, is for their needs to be met as a child. If you do that, they start to de-escalate, and they start to come down, and they start to cooperate, and they start to have a dialogue with you, actually. And that's been one of my personal coping skills of how to deal with individuals.
Okay, so now that's fascinating, because I'm thinking, I'm running a parallel about you and I. We work on a similar path, but in complete opposite directions. So where you are seeing, let me help you learn some coping skills, that you're lacking an ability to deal with this in a fashion that's good for you or anybody else,
Right.
for that matter.
Right.
And let me help you with those coping skills. And in the technology realm, it's almost the opposite of, you could see the same thing, but my job is trying to have them not have to deal with anything. So if it's whether it's a software, a device that they're interacting with, the human interacting with that, you aren't trying to put the weight on them to deal with what's in front of you. Rather, you're trying to take the weight off of them.
I see that.
And have that technological interface do it for them, so that their process is just seamless and they don't have to throw a tantrum.
I got it. See,
it's about opposite.
So
I never realized
your
that.
early intervention before they get upset.
Yes.
So you're creating the safety net so they don't become upset and become irritable, and workplace violence happens.
It's a pre-de-escalation.
It is. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And that's what we try to do with psych. We try to do all the things way ahead of time, so a patient doesn't get a stressor and then they go off and or medications, whatever. So they don't hit a stressor and then go off in a whole different direction. It's just
right.
Instead of medications and intervention, psych intervention, you create a network of wonderful ability for them not to get upset, because the computers work very well, or the programs work very well.
And
it's brilliant. And what you do, I have to say, and the things you've told me that you do, it's just, I get lost completely. It's just, Scott, by the way, is one of the most brilliant computer programs I've ever known in my entire life.
Well, thanks. But what that made me think of was, you're talking about in captivity, a patient where you have that ability to have the forward thought to try and keep them in a same place, right?
Yes. Hopefully, yes.
But now, and this is a huge topic that is obviously, it's just happening now in our world, and I don't have many answers for it, if any at all. But what do you do? We've been talking about a one-on-one experience, whether it's negotiation, whether it's the human-computer interface or whatever. What are the possibilities when you're dealing with mass hysteria, violence, the protesting, the looting? I mean, well, let's separate those. Protesting is protesting. That's one thing.
Right.
Another thing is violence and looting and torching and that kind of stuff.
Right. It's
Um,
very different, very separate. And,
so
and a lot of people have
there's not
blurred
much
that.
you need to do with that. That's perfectly acceptable. Everybody should be able to have their voice heard, right?
Correct.
So there's not a lot asked of do something about this.
Right.
But on this other side, what do you do not just in a situation where the tensions have risen to the point where there's many individuals violent
Mhm.
and looking to act that out on anything in front of them, um, but then the additional injection of people that aren't even from the area, maybe coming
Mhm.
in just to cause
Yeah.
chaos,
See,
just
that's
to
a
use it
that's a
as
whole different
as
layer.
a setup
That's
for a whole nother explosion of things.
right, and that's an
What
intentional
then?
layer. Yes. Yeah, that layer is very intentional, and that one is difficult. The other ones are very manageable. Um, the right to protest is always there. It should be there. People who loot and become violent, there's a lot of causation for that, and a lot of this it goes way back to years ago, and some of this is an actual consequence of the fact that and let me divide this. Some of this is something that is has a causation that goes years back. Some of it is very current. And so there's just tons of layers that have created the perfect storm for this. And this is kind of what's going on, is you have a perfect storm for the elements to happen, and then you sprinkle that with intentional issues, and it just, that's when it flashes, that's when it burns really quickly like that. So um, so the long term is that a lot of this is a consequence of the resources for individuals have gone away over the decades, and so people don't have the resources to exercise their mental health, the resources for healthcare, mental health care, the resources for the mentally ill to seek help. Um, a lot of these resources, the majority of those type of resources that allowed people to vent and get the frustrations out, and to be placed on medications if they need to be, if they needed to talk to somebody, a psychiatrist, a therapist, a counselor, a social worker, all these things that we used to be able to do very easily up until the 90s. The 80s, no problem. We had the ability. The 70s, it was beautiful. People had resources. If you wanted to talk to somebody, all you had to say is, I want to talk to somebody.
Right.
And it was rolled out.
Imagine that. Imagine a
Insurance,
responsive society.
when I first started in psych in the 70s, um, insurance actually paid for your ability to go get help. Um, and a lot of this is the result of insurance companies deciding they didn't want to pay for help anymore, um, and limit the ability people had. And people in offices were making decisions on medical care and behavioral health care that didn't have any experience. They were just an office worker uh, looking and crunching numbers, and they were the ones who decided, I don't think we should pay for this anymore, instead of people who actually had experience in medical and behavioral health environments. But in the 70s and all through the 80s, insurance was great. It would actually pay for people that needed help, or if you even just wanted help. If you had the inkling, maybe I should go talk to somebody, you could do that, and it was very easy to do. Um, in the 70s, it was not uncommon, and this is all through the 80s too. It was not uncommon if, let's say, for instance, you had an adolescent, somebody who was 15 years old, 13 years old, and they were a really troubled kid. They had horrible life experiences. They may have been molested or abused or neglected, bad parenting. The parents may have left them or abandoned them or dropped them off with the grandparents forever, and just left, and or incarcerated, and or on drugs themselves, or maybe they had mental illness and were just non-existent parents. Whatever the situation was, where that child is really messed up now because of all of the stuff that they went through as a child, early teens, things like that. And that's a kid who really needed acute care. And it was no problem for that person, that kid, to be admitted into an acute care psych facility that could take them and help them and repair that damage. And it wasn't uncommon for a kid like that to be inpatient, not long-term treatment facility, like a residential treatment. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about inpatient, acute care. Let's help them every single day, all day long, 24 hours a day. It wasn't uncommon for a kid like that to be hospitalized for 6 months, 8 months, even a year. Now, a lot of people go, my God, a year in a psych hospital? Well, if you have somebody who is really screwed up, and he is going to go out and commit a crime, do drugs, kill themselves, then yeah, they need some extensive help and acute care for a long period of time. And you have kids that ordinarily would have been on the street and died, drug overdoses or killed themselves or something. And each month you'd see that kid getting better and better and better and better. And after a while, the defenses would start to drop, because it takes a while for things like that, for them to trust other human beings that have done horrible things to them or nothing at all, for them to establish trust. And you'd see the layers of trust building as the defenses went down. And once that child left, 8 months, a year later, they had the defenses to combat bad parenting, bad peers, environment, and they would leave, and that kid would not come back. The only time they would come back is maybe a year later, showing you how well they were doing in life, right? And that was so rewarding to see. And that was commonplace, to send them out. And that kid had the defenses and the help and the coping mechanisms to be able to combat all that crap in their lives. Now, in the 90s, they started taking that away. Well, and by the time the 2000s came and the teens, you're lucky if a kid can be in a psych hospital if they really need the help, if they're suicidal, if they're on drugs. You're lucky if a kid can stay 3 days. At the tops, maybe a week. What can you do in a week? You can't do anything in a week. You just put a Band-Aid and send them back out in the same situation, and those kids keep coming back and back and back and back and back and back. And so you have what creates a career patient, because they just keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back, and you put Band-Aids and you just do that until eventually they overdose or they commit suicide or something. And so you haven't been able to layer those defenses onto them and remove the defenses that allow them to actually seek or accept that help like that. And that's what we're facing now. So a lot of the resources got taken away over the years. And so we have hundreds of thousands, millions of people out there now with very limited resources, or the ability to vent, or to say, this is what I'm upset about, this is what happened to me, this is what I feel like doing. And so you have just tons of people out there in that condition, instead of people who years ago could have gotten some help or vent or say, this is what I'm angry about, or this is what I believe, or this is what I feel like doing, or this is what I feel should be done. A lot of that just didn't happen. So you have so many people, like in an aquarium where you have mice in an aquarium, and there are way too many mice in an aquarium. After a while, they start biting each other instead of something that's allowed to be in an orderly fashion. So you have old resources that weren't there, that created the recipe for people to uprise. And then you have the current status, which is what we're dealing with right now.
How we transitioned from that, where help was available, to what you're saying, very limited and ineffective help available now, was you had referred to the 70s, but then when the 80s came, and psych became very popular.
Yeah.
It became, so you're like, hey, it's cool now to go get help. It's super neat. And so I think there's this explosion of people going for it.
Yeah.
And that probably raised the profit motive in the insurance companies. Is like, whoa, hey, whoa. Yeah. We can't pay for everybody to go get psych help. Right. It shouldn't be so cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the transition started in the 90s, is the blow of trying to pay for all that.
Right.
Instead of, like, we might see it in other places.
Other countries, they provide that.
Right. And that's why I was saying it's a whole nother topic, because we get into the whole socialized medicine and whatnot. That I wasn't trying to detract from this right now. But
that's the one thing I have to say. Hey, everybody gets care. You don't have to have insurance. You don't have to make a lot of money. You're still going to get somebody to listen to you.
Yeah. And in practice, or in theory, it seems like a great idea. And I believe that the research in practice is not turning out to be a utopia.
It's got huge problems.
It's not a utopia.
Huge problem. But the only part that I like is that if somebody says, I need to go talk to somebody, there's usually somebody you can find.
Eventually.
Yeah. You may be on a waiting list for a little while, but you can talk to somebody. And it's a whole other can of worms. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's pros and cons to that, and a lot of cons, but it's like we just don't have a good system right now, and we have literally no system. And then to put on top of that the pressures of 2020, that's all it took. That's all it took to pressurize that into something that has created a combustible situation. And that's what we're in right now. And so that pressurization has created that combustion for people to go out and do crazy things and loot and hurt people, and the violence has increased, and it's a perfect recipe for disaster. And then you have what you mentioned about the sprinkling of intention. That's like it's already internally combusting, and then you put flash powder onto it. It's gonna go up in flames
and take away any accountability or a consequence. Just remove that, and that way now you are flash powder, and you could just go be flash powder. Have a ball.
Unlimited supply of flash powder. Yeah. There you go.
And no consequence. There's
and you flash it, and you go, and I go, and you look around. Hey, nothing happened. Let's do that again.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then if you raise a greater amount of sociopaths through limited social responsibility.
That's right.
And then give it a name like that. It's acceptable.
Yes.
Say, no, that's okay. You go do that. You just get that out of your system.
Yep. Just get it out of your system, right? Yeah, we have We have the highest level of narcissism and sociopathy ever. And we, the society, have created that.
And we nurture it
We
now.
nurtured it.
The
This
kids don't-
society has nurtured the sociopathy and the narcissism in our society today. And this is a consequence. What we're seeing right now is a consequence of our own doing as a society.
without resolution. There's no, it's not like, this is just going on because it's a long, hot summer kind of thing. There's no looking to an end to it.
No, yeah.
The efforts
it's going to have a ride, and because the levels of violence are increasing, the sociopathy and narcissism is increasing, so it doesn't have a platform for leveling off. There is no platform to level off right now. It just is continuing to go up, and that's the worrisome part to me. Is like, oh well, maybe when COVID's over and everyone's like not compressed and just absolutely stir crazy, things will get back to normal. Well, some things will get back to normal, but this is for most people the new norm. A lot of what we're experiencing is the new norm, and a lot of the same situations will still be present after that. And so it may have a different label from time to time, just like Karens have different labels from years. You have Karens now. You had the permit patties back in the 90s. There's always going to be a label for what's happening now, but it's kind of the same thing that was happening years ago.
But one thing our generation knows, because we were raised with it, is when the adults showed up on the Lord of the Flies island, the madness stopped. And until the adults show up,
the adults decide to be adults.
Yeah.
Right.
Until the adults show up, the madness goes on.
It does.
And I think so.
Which then goes right back to what I said before, is dealing with children.
Yes. but you neglected that sometimes they do need to be spanked.
Metaphorically, yes, absolutely. Yes.
You have to have boundaries, and a boundaryless society, nobody wants to live in that. No. I don't think.
Well, no, even children know they need boundaries. They will fight you every step of the way, but even a child is designed to expand boundaries. A child starting from very, very young, 2 years old, starting from 2, it is in their DNA to expand and push boundaries out. And that's what allows them to actually grow into adult brains. But there's a whole other reason why those boundaries are pushed, and it's they know they need limits. A child doesn't want limits at that moment because they're not using their frontal lobe, and it's just all mush, and they're just like, I'm going to do anything I want, and they want to do anything they want. But they know inside, in their DNA, they know somewhere they need limits and boundaries, and the reason they push is to see what's going to be pushed back, so they can then develop their boundaries. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in that pushing process, the hope that they don't know, they're not in touch with this, they won't be in touch with this into their 20s, but the reason they push the boundaries is to see what's going to be pushed back, so I can develop a boundary for my humanness, my life, my id, right? And so if they push and push and push and nothing pushes back, if they don't have a parental figure to push back and say, no, that's too far, right? And they go, oh, okay. They recognize they can't go past that boundary. Right. That translates to a child's brain. They don't know this. They're not in touch with this. That translates into that child's brain. They care enough, that parental figure cares enough to say no and to establish a boundary. Okay, I got it. And so they must care. They must love me. And so that's their translation of how people love them, is to create the boundary that they try to push out. And so if a parental figure does not do that, which that started a long time ago, of just letting people do what they want to do and no accountability and no responsibility. And they push and they push and they push and no boundaries get pushed back, that allows them to create the boundaries that are far beyond what a human is designed for. And so they translate that, they're not in touch with it again, is the translate it to be, oh, you don't love me enough to actually keep me safe, to keep me in check. And so that's what started happening. So they start pushing the boundaries more and more and more. And so a child goes, okay, I got away with that. Let's try to get away with this. And they steal something. Oh, well, they didn't really care. They go, oh, that's okay. I'll buy it for you anyway. Oh, well, okay, that didn't work. Because they want that boundary to be pushed back by that person to say, no, I love you enough to, and I care enough about you to keep you safe, and to say no, and to create good functional boundaries for your humanness. But they don't do that. And they go, well, okay, I'm going to go wreck a car. All right. So they get a car and they wreck that car. And they go, okay, they gotta push a boundary on this. This is their little internal dialogue that they're not in touch with. And they don't. They go, oh, yeah, that happens. We'll buy you a new car. Well, okay, well, that didn't work. So let me do drugs. I'm going to do drugs. I'm going to buy drugs. In fact, I'm going to sell drugs, right? And then they get caught. And then, oh, we just hire the attorney to get them off and get them out of jail, and they don't do jail time, and they don't have responsibility. Well, that didn't work. Well, now I got to like deal with a drug cartel. Let's try that and see if that works. Maybe they'll push back, right? They just keep on pushing and pushing and pushing, hoping that parental figure will push back. So they go, oh, okay, so here's the boundary. Got it. All right. I'm okay now, and you care enough, you love me enough to create a boundary and keep me safe. Thank you so much for doing that. That's the internal process that every child knows is in there. They just don't know, they don't know it's in there, but it's in their DNA.
Right.
And so the more people allow that boundary to go out, they don't establish the boundaries, then they create their own boundaries that are limitless. And that creates narcissism. That creates sociopathy, right? Because they have never had to deal with boundaries, and so I must be boundaryless.
Yeah, omniscient.
Omniscient, yes. I am the ultimate, and nobody can mess with me because I have boundaries bigger than everyone else's because I've established them. I am boundaryless, and that's what builds. That's what builds narcissism. I'm sorry.
That's also why others' lives become less important. That
right.
They're above others. So another's life, to take it doesn't mean anything.
Correct. Right.
Because they don't have the same value as
No. We have a family member, and he's one of the greatest, biggest narcissists I have ever known, besides somebody who's incarcerated.
Okay.
And he calls his wife my wife, and he calls his son my son, right? When he's talking about them, he never says the name or the wife's name. When he talks about them, he talks about my son, my wife, right? This is family. We're family, right? But the reason why he does that is that he's above all of the human beings with his narcissism. So even his wife and his child aren't as important as he is.
Yeah.
And so they're labels instead of just family together. They're labels. They're below me.
Yeah.
And that's how he treats every single human being like that. And it's tough to watch when he throws people down like that, even his own family. And that's why nobody wants to be around him.
Right. It's no fun being nowhere near a person you're hanging out with.
No, and he has no idea. He has no idea. He can't figure that out. Why he that's not even a concept of people not wanting to be around him. He just crabs and exercises his narcissism, and it's just a revolving cycle all the time.
Well, because
he has no idea that nobody wants to be around him, that he's a jerk.
Because as a narcissist, who wouldn't want to be around me?
Exactly. That's where that cycle happens.
Not want to be around me.
I'm the greatest.
Yeah.
So it becomes everyone else's problem.
Because if they don't want to hang around with me, that just shows how little they are worth.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
God, you gotta love nurses. That's why there's so many websites and memes and Instagram pages and Facebook accounts now on dealing with narcissists. There's just hundreds of thousands of them now. You can just scroll through how to deal with a narcissist, because it is such a huge problem out there that people are going, how do I deal with a narcissist? Well, now you got plenty of information because there's so many of them out there. There's a lot of data now of how to do it.
But the problem is that everybody is thinking it's someone else is the narcissist.
Right.
It's you that's the narcissist.
Right.
So
I
need to figure out how to deal with you.
In some cases, absolutely.
Meanwhile, I got to get some selfies of me. Hold on.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Yes. That's a whole. We should do a whole show around just the selfie phenomena.
Let's do that. I know our time kind of running out of time here, but
on the list, definitely on the list.
Okay.
And then, we'll get callers in on that one. Yes.
We'll get photo bombed on that one.
Yes, we will. I'm sure we will. I'm kind of hoping because they would help prove the point that we're talking about. As an example,
these videos coming through of like, how could you call me a narcissist? Look at me.
We will be able to prove as examples. Oh, look, there's another example right there.
And there can be those tests kind of like the MMPI and stuff that'll be like, if you're not a narcissist, send us a selfie. And they might just fembot, like their head will explode.
We could do online Rorschach tests and MMPIs and everything.
Oh, that'd be great.
Just real time testing.
That would be great.
Yes, we should do that. Future shows, we will do live psych testing online for the worst psych advice you ever want. Because of course, that is our mantra. The worst psychological advice from Pop Psychology Live ever. Please do not follow our advice. We have the worst advice ever. And so just don't even, please go seek different advice if you want good advice. We have the worst advice.
Our motto is, you get what you pay for.
Right.
So don't expect much.
Right. Please don't expect much. This is literally, it's going to be like the Seinfeld show, where it's like, well, what's the show about? And Seinfeld says nothing. It's about nothing.
It's a show about nothing.
It's a show about nothing.
With bad advice.
Right.
Bad opinions.
Correct. Right. Yeah.
Nothing you should take seriously.
No, ever. No. So yeah, that's kind of
rub your brain.
Yeah, the flavor of this, and we will basically realize what this show is about as it progresses or degresses. Okay,
so could that be our tagline? We'll rub your brain.
Rub your brain.
I really like that.
That could be kind of Epstein-like. I don't know.
I just think it's provocative. It's evocative.
We'll rub your brain.
It's kind of funny. It's like, what?
We'll rub your brain the wrong way.
What do you mean? And every week it'll mean something differently.
Yeah.
This week we might just make you mad. We'll tell
Yeah,
you
right. Yeah. We will
just
rub your brain the wrong way.
the wrong way. This week we'll rub your brain nicely.
Yeah.
This week we'll rub your brain patronizingly.
Yeah.
But every week
I like it.
we'll rub your brain.
I like it. Okay. Rub your brain. And then we'll have a little squeaky sound.
Yes. Perfect. I like it. I think that is great.
We'll get a little sound effect.
Yeah, the squeegee kind of thing.
Right. Rubbing your brain the wrong way today.
And we can have a bunch of different ways of saying it, like different voices.
Yeah.
Like we can have a Barry White, like
Yeah.
your brain. Oh baby, we're gonna rub your brain.
I like it. Okay, we could go with that.
You know, and we could have the other side like, you're not rubbing my brain.
Get your mitts off of my brain.
People that are against it. Oh, no, I don't want you rubbing my brain. Gross. Somebody in the background going, ew.
Ew. We'll have to have that sound effect too.
My brain.
We'll have that sound effect. Ew.
Ew. The squeak, squeak, squeak. Ew.
I love it. Okay. All right. So write that one down.
And that can just be, we have the thing where we always make the disclaimer, you should never listen to us or do anything we say or think like we do or believe anything we say or whatever. Yep. But that can also be another one of those things that's always present is we rub your brain, but then there's reactions to that, or there's just the voice that's against it or doesn't want it, or somebody that it happened to and they're like, I didn't really like it. And there you have it, folks. If we've offended you in any way, make sure to call Phoenix Training Group.
.com. I'm sure we offend somebody every day somewhere. In a good way, though, in a therapeutic way.
We offend you in a therapeutic way. That's an important distinction.
It is.
Don't just be normally offended by us, and don't just take it to heart or get angry. But recognize it as that we care, and that we're really helping you along.
Right, and it's a therapeutic offense that you should be grateful for down the road because you're growing because of it.
Yes, there's growth here.
There is growth. The offense is a growth, and it's going to grow exponentially. So what we give here is, if it's offensive to anyone, it's therapeutic, and so down the road, you will thank us for that growth.
You just have to hang in there. Don't just get all mad and wander off, staying that way.
No.
But really take it as an opportunity to reflect.
That's anti-therapeutic.
On why you're mad. Right. And really look at the root causes, and we'll be here as you grow through it. Come back each Friday and we'll help you deal with your rage that's building.
Yes.
Because of us.
We may perpetuate it, but we may help it. It depends on the show, really.
Think of us as that happy little pimple that, once you pop it, you just feel so much better.
So much better. All right, my friend, let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
The first soft opening of Pop Psychology Live, brought to you by what is it? What is it this week? Anything? Oh, wait, we don't have any advertisers. Forget it. Never mind.
It's
I
brought to you
forgot. It's
by
new.
Empty Wallet
Yeah,
Productions.
Empty Wallet Productions. So we have to just go with the default with phoenixtraininggroup.com. That's who's funding this at the moment.
All right. Very good, my friend. And for everybody out there, we will see you and hear you next Friday.
Yes. Thank you for showing up and looking at this. And hopefully we'll have a few more people down the road look at it.
Thanks for playing along.
Yeah. Thanks for playing. I appreciate that.
All right.
All right.
Talk to you later, my friend.
Yeah. Okay.